we have collected a lot of questions from all of you. We have run a survey and then we have collected those questions and we have prioritized them. So we'll be asking them one by one, and I hope it is, it's going to be relevant to you, and we are going to have a lot of interesting discussion around them. So, hi Prasad.
Hey Saurabh. All right. Ask your questions. Happy to answer.
Yeah. So let me check the first question. Yeah. So the first question is how to approach a problem statement in a take-home kind of assignment.
Okay. So does anybody have an example of a take-home assignment?
You can raise your hands or you can type in yes in comment box.
And you could probably just give me like the general stuff and I can kind of break it down for you guys.
Yes, I have.
Okay, go ahead, Kranti. Give me an example.
So it's like redesigning a dashboard kind of thing where it has multiple data points.
Okay.
So
you're given a dashboard and you're asked to redesign it. Is that right?
Yes, it's a kind of sharing screenshot of the dashboard, like you would be asked to redesign it.
Got it. So how would you basically, and do you have any other constraints that are given to you?
So constraints is like timeline on that, nothing that sort, like it has to be redesigned. But when it comes to the problem, there are no constraints actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is actually a very interesting game, right? So the smart guys will basically say, okay, I need you to do X task that we know will take you like, 5 weeks, 6 weeks for a 2-person team. Okay. But what they will say is, I need you to do X task in, let's say 4 hours. Okay. And that is one flavor of that task. The second kind of task that, when you get take-home assignments is where, these are the smarter guys, right? The smarter guys will tell you, this is the problem I want you to solve. You do whatever you want, right? So when we are evaluating, or when you need to think about all the elements that are being evaluated here, okay? So for the folks that are basically looking at, no timelines, nothing, this is just a general statement and all that. Now they're basically looking at, they're basically giving you an extremely vague scenario and they're asking you to react to it, right? Now, the challenge that you need to think about is how are you going to approach it? So the first thing that you need to do is, you need to think about the approach. Okay. So if there are, and Kranti says there's a 1 week, time constraint. So there are 2 other tasks in that situation, but let me talk about the situation where there are no constraints. Okay. And this is something that we at UX Reactor do, is we basically give no constraints and say, okay, go figure it out. Okay. So the basic thing that we're looking at is a couple of different behavioral elements. Okay. Are you, looking at that problem and breaking it down? Okay. Are you trying to prioritize and decide what of that problem, what part of that problem you're going to solve? Because you know that it is impossible to solve the whole problem in the 4 hours or 5 hours that has been given to you. So we are looking to see whether you have the prioritization skills and the skills to variabilize the problem. First, you need to be able to break down the problem and then prioritize which of those problems is most important. Okay. That is the first thing that we are looking to see. Then after that, what we're looking to see is, do you have a plan for achieving it? Because even then, even if you take a small problem that you say, this is the biggest, this is what I'm going to solve, you need to then be able to have the planning skills to achieve it, right? So if you're saying, even if you spend 10, 15 minutes and say, this is my plan, this is my strategy, this is the reason why I prioritize it, that's great, because it basically tells us that you are now able to take an ambiguous task and convert it into a smaller digestible chunk. Okay. And then what we do is we look at your execution skills. So when you're executing, how are you thinking about the problem, right? Are you thinking about it just as a redesign, as a visual exercise? Are you thinking about it as an interaction exercise? Are you thinking of it as a, as some other hybrid kind of exercise? That is basically telling us how you're thinking about the problem. Okay. So when you do finally present this final solution, we are basically looking at What was the critical thought that went in, and how did you systematically approach, and were you able to complete it within the time that you said it was? And then we'll also look at, there's the technical cleanliness of the artifact or whatever. If you do any artifacts, doesn't matter, it has to be visual or black and white or whatever. We look at the technical components of that artifact and make a decision. Okay, so this actually is the harder task. Okay, now imagine you had 1 week. Now that's awesome, because now you've been given a time, right? And now, by the way, when you're not given a time, one thing that we also look at is, are you communicating back with us, right? Because a common reaction that we all have is, okay, we've been given this task, let's just start running and doing it. No, right? So if you have a doubt, can you clarify? Can you send a minutes of meeting and say, this is how I'm looking at the problem? If you have any inputs, I would love to hear it. Otherwise, I will continue doing it. Just sending that email, right? One email is, am I right? Okay, that is not what we are saying. You never send that kind of email. Am I right? Am I on the right track? Because that tells me that you don't have the confidence to approach the problem. Okay. The other approach is, this is how I'm breaking it down. This is my plan. This is my strategy. This is what I'm doing. If you have a different opinion, please let me know. Otherwise, this is the path I'm going to continue. That tells me that you're confident and you are able to break down the problem. You have a sound reasoning, and then you're basically giving me the opportunity to weigh in and tell you what I want. Okay, so that is the part. Now, let us say you've been given a fixed time. Okay, again, the same principle applies now, but you've been given a week. So now what you're doing is, what I would like to see is, okay, you've been given a week and you've been given 3 tasks based on your text. You said there are 2 other tasks in addition to this. So what I'm looking at is, okay, so how much time are you willing to spend? Now, here's the trick. Should you spend 20 hours just because you've been given a week? Should you spend 40 hours? How much time should you spend? Okay, any thoughts on that? Yeah, go ahead, Pooja.
It will be depend upon the problem statement. How much time?
Okay, but let's say are you going to spend a full 80 hours or 60 hours doing that task?
No.
So
So
how much
as
time
you said, we have to prioritize and break down. So accordingly,
Right.
we can decide as per the priority of the task. We can decide the timing for that, and then we can say that, okay, I'll be able to finish in this much hours.
True, but the task is generally given to be a larger task, right? If the more you think about it, the bigger the task gets. If you don't think about it, it looks like a very simple task. Right? And that's the beauty of pretty much all the UX tasks that we get. Like, even if you don't try, that is the task that comes through. So the question is, how much time can you spend, or should you spend on a task like this? Right? Because the other company has given you a full week. So how much time should you spend?
Maybe at least 3 to 4 days, 3 days at least.
3 days.
Yeah.
So that's about 24 hours.
Yeah. Around,
Okay.
but it will be divided on an everyday basis.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Anybody else? How much time should we spend? We've been given a whole week, 3 tasks we need to complete. 3 hours per day. So 3 hours per day, you've been given 1 week, which is 5 days. So, at best 7 days. So you're talking another 21 hours to that time frame, right? So the answer to that is, if you spend only 5 hours doing the task, is that going to be a negative for you?
No.
Why not?
Because maybe after we do the task, we get some time to even communicate and understand whether we are going on the right path or not, and we'll have time to keep rectifying, maybe.
Yeah, but that is again a problem, right? So if you're going mid-course and you're talking to people, that means you've already committed time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas if you do the planning ahead of time and say, tell me, this is the direction I'm planning to go to, this is my prioritization. If you do not agree, or if you have any inputs, I would love to hear from you. That's a very different way of communicating. Right? The second way is more confident. I'm starting off. I think I'm right. Now tell me if you have any inputs. So the answer to that is this, right? So for a lot of you that are working, right, you're probably working 8-10 hours a day. Right? You may not have that time. And so it is unrealistic of somebody to say, you're going to spend about 24 hours. Right? So this is where the game gets played, where, the people that do not communicate back, they will work, they will spend 20 hours, 30 hours, nights, weekends, whatever, or they might even take leave from their job and they do it. But then at the end of the day, they get frustrated, right? I mean, how many jobs are you going to do the task where, you're working 20, 30 hours in addition? And so this is where you see the feedback that goes online. It's like, these guys are making me do a task that they should pay me money for, right? The better way to do it, the more rational way, because companies also recognize that you're working and you're busy, right? The more rational way of looking at it is, listen, how much time do you have really to spend? That is the answer, right? So some of you might have family obligations, some of you might have other things, right? You can always turn back and say, listen, I've got a lot of these obligations. So currently I'm able to spend about 1 hour a week, right? Or 1 hour a day. And so net, I'm going to be able to spend about 8 hours, right? Even if you say 4 hours, that's okay, right? There is nothing wrong in saying that, because you are clearly setting expectations for those guys, saying, listen, between my job and my family and all these other things, I think the realistic time that I can spend is about 4 hours. Hence, I'm going to prioritize this task in this manner, right? So what the other company is looking at is, yeah, they might look for the final artifact, but they're also appreciating the fact that you understand your limitations and you're planning within your limitations. Even if you spend 4 hours, but you give me a plan for 4 hours and you systematically approach the task, I will still appreciate it. Right? You don't have to do a full out artifact and all that. Just do a small part, but do it really, really well and explain. Whatever you do it really well. Okay. And that will work out really, really well. So which is where the initial communication, remember that, we say you send the mail saying, within the first 30, 40 minutes, you say, I've looked at the task. This is what it is. Between my work and stuff like that, I can probably give about 4 hours. Hence, this is the reason why I'm prioritizing. This is my plan of action. If you have any thoughts, please let me know. Otherwise, I will start executing, right? Or I intend to start executing tomorrow. That's it, done. Right? You really don't need to spend 20, 30, 40 hours, because companies realize that, they don't want you to spend that much time, right? They're looking to see how you would handle a task that is going to be very tough on you and on your time. And if you are able to show that planning and that strategic level thought process, it's a plus for you. Okay. Cool. Any questions, thoughts, disagreements? Kranti, what do you think?
No, it sounds very practical, actually. To be frank, I didn't approach in that way, so I agree. So now I know like where I have to correct this.
Right. And again, you have two choices, right? One choice that I've seen both sides as an employer and as an employee as well. But, I've been lucky. So all the companies that I've applied for, with the exception of 1 or 2, have been very respectful of my time, and they have kind of, worked with me on that, right? So that's also a great way. This is also something that you need to understand. When you're applying for a job, it's not just the other company that's selecting you, it's you selecting the company as well, right? So you want to see how they are reacting to you, how they're engaging with you, are they being nice with you? Because that's how the work environment is going to be, right? So, one of my friends was applying for this job, and he wrote me like a wrong email, and he was applying for Amazon in their US teams. And he says, I was applying as a researcher, and every other company would just tell me, this is the problem, now go do the work or whatever, solve the problem. But in Amazon, what they actually did was they sat down, another researcher sat down with this person, and they brainstormed with this person and came to a solution together. And he said, I loved it, right? And there are many ways that you can run it. So it's also a way that, how the company reacts to you, how they engage with you is also a very good indication of, how well you would enjoy that environment.
True, sir.
Cool. Awesome. So, Saurabh, next question, or can I ask Kevin?
Yeah, sir, I have follow up with the same point, actually. So, like, how can we ask for feedback? So something, even though like we will be having in mind that they won't be giving reply to that. So even then we have to ask them. So how can we approach for feedback?
Right. So feedback is a very interesting thing, right? So, and I've also seen many use cases of that. So the biggest problem with feedback is this. Let us say that you are genuinely interested in growing, okay? and you really want to understand and you have a great attitude of taking feedback. You ask me for feedback and I give you feedback, that's the best use case, right? Because I'm helping you grow and I also feel good giving you the feedback, okay? But a majority of the times what happens is when somebody is, we ask for feedback, but a lot of times when we get the feedback, we look at it as a justification of, no, but this is what I thought. No, that is what I thought. Now it becomes an argument, right? I say, you say. And so no interviewer wants to be in that situation where I've already rejected you and I'm also feeling the pain. I mean, I'm sure, the person I'm rejecting is feeling sad. I'm also feeling sad because, at the end of the day, it's a human kind of a situation, right? So now if the person is arguing, I don't know how to say no, like, I'm sorry, the decision is made, right? And so that is a very sticky situation for interviewers. And then the second one is actually even worse. So if we give the feedback and the person goes out and tweets about it or like does something on social media, whatever, now everybody and their grandfather has an opinion about what we did, right? And so it's the same deal like, okay, why would I want to paint a huge target on myself? Okay. Which is why companies usually have a format which says, this is the format that we're going to give feedback. It's going to be very generic and we're not going to talk about any of the problems, right? But that said, here's the trick that helps you get feedback. Okay? And the one thing is, never argue. Whatever feedback they give is a thank you very much. This is very helpful. If you just say that, it builds a lot of respect for you in the other person. Even if, they might not hire you, but they like you, they might actually turn around and tell their friend like, hey, there's this guy, do you want to talk to him? And I've seen that happen where, a hiring manager might not recommend somebody, but tomorrow in some other company, they might say this person is a great person because they have a great attitude. Okay. So whenever you're taking feedback, the common thing is, don't get into the argument. The decision is already made. And at the end of the day, the feedback is their opinion. Take what is valuable for you, what's not valuable, ignore it. But at the same time, thank them for their time and their honesty in giving feedback because it helps you grow. Okay. That's one mindset that you need to have. Then the second thing, this is the trick that you need to get the feedback. So what you do is right after all your interviews are done, okay, look that person up and send them, always ask for their email address and stuff like that and send them an email. Say, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. And, sometimes you might have realized that you gave the wrong answer or whatever. You say, when I thought about it, I realized that this question, the answer for this question was not exactly what I wanted to say. So here's my correct answer or whatever. And then, you can always say, I appreciate your time and stuff like that. Now you built a relationship, right? And then you connect to them on LinkedIn or whatever. And that's fine. So you're basically coming off as very thankful. Okay. Now, if the decision is against you, and generally if the decision is for you, and people like you, you will almost always get a response very, very quickly saying, hey, we loved it, right? We love talking to you. But let's say something is not working, you'll get a sense that it's not going to work out in this organization. That's okay, right? You can always send a follow-up email, say, hey, I'm really sad. I didn't get it, but I understand, right? And I would have loved to learn from you, but could you tell me what happened? So what that does is it creates a system of communication that's outside of the HR channels. Okay. And it also puts the interviewer at comfort to tell you honestly what they're thinking. Okay. So that's the game. So it's always about building a relationship with the interviewer and then ask it outside, but make them feel at comfort that you're not going to be that guy that's going to drag their name into the mud and make them feel bad about it. Does that make sense,
Yes,
Kranti?
Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Okay.
Okay, so Kevin, do you have anything to add or you have a separate question?
I have a question actually, because Prasad said that 5 hours a week may be possible for a task, but what happens with me is whenever I look at a task, it is it's so vague, it is difficult to understand. 5 hours at least to understand, and if I make personas more 5 hours, then altogether 10 hours, what do I do in this case?
Right. And that's the point. You don't have to do everything, Kevin. By the way, your camera is not on, so I can't talk to you.
Sorry, today it was disabled, so it be on the rest time.
Okay, cool. So I think, see, the point is you are not responsible for solving all the problems. The company knows that you can't solve the problem in that time frame. You understand? And so what they're looking at is how are you breaking it down and how are you choosing what problem to solve?
Okay.
Okay. So that's the way it is. And again, if you're looking at UI level stuff, they might say redesign the screen. Okay. And that also, like, we have given those kinds of tasks. We give a workflow. I mean, we give a wireframe and say, can you design the screen, create a, put colors and like, make it look nice, right? Can you do the visual design for it? And for the person who's a UX person, they'll think differently. For a UI person, they'll think differently about the same screen. And so that's also a very good indication for us. Okay, what is their type of thought when they're approaching the problem? Okay, so
Yeah.
I think the way I would actually look at it is the variabilization, right? So what we just taught that class. Look at that variabilization, variabilize the problem, look at the problems that you can solve within the time, look at the problem you cannot solve, and basically approach it from that perspective.
Yeah, I get it. And that variabilization is a very cool technique. Thank you.
Yeah. And just what we did on the third day, right? The third day was how to do any design task or how to do your portfolio. Focus on that and break down what you can do and then solve it. You're fine.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Kevin.
Cool. So Rima, we actually have 5 or 6 questions lined up that we prioritize. So I would say if you have any question, message to me and I'll get it also in the pipeline. But I would like to move forward with the questions that we have on our list. Okay. Yeah.
Guys, turn on your cameras now. It just looks like I'm talking to a bunch of rectangles which are all like dark. It makes me feel completely unloved here. Cool.
Cool. So the next question for you, Prasad, is after an year of work in the industry, I really don't know where do I stand into the market. How do I evaluate that?
Do we have the chart that talks about seniority and what you should know at each of the levels? Do we have that?
We have it. I can pull it up in few seconds.
Yeah. So there is a standard, right? Every company will have its own growth chart, right? There's career planning that has to be done in every organization, or at least every type 3 organization will have a career plan and a career progression chart for all the roles that they have in their company. Okay. So, what we've done, Saurabh and I have done is we've tried to generalize based on, what we've seen in all the companies. And we basically created a generalized career progression chart that will hopefully help you solve it. Okay. So, not this one yet. Remember the triangle? What you're doing as an individual contributor versus a senior guy.
Right. Yeah. Let me look it up.
Okay, cool. So essentially what I'm looking at, the way I would look at it is the first year that you're working. Okay. At the end of first year, my expectation is that you understand all your UI fundamentals, right? So you should understand your forms. You should be able to design, like, the simple thing is, if given a screen, you should be able to identify, critique it. You should be able to identify the common problems. You should be able to give solutions for that or alternatives for that. Okay. And you should be able to articulate yourself in a reasonable manner. So, the other person can understand. So understand. So the first year pretty much is, you're probably going to be doing a lot of screen level work and a widget level work under supervision of somebody, right? So that is the evidence of success out that is I'm able to see that can you solve a problem or can you take a problem and break it down based on the experience that you have. Okay. So that's the simplest thing. Then at the next level, after a year, you're done with that. The next year, what I'm expecting is, okay, are you independently able to think about the strategy? How should you approach the problem? How should you break it down? So there's that independent thinking component that I'm expecting as you're looking at the screen. Okay. Now, when you get to the third year onwards, I'm basically looking at more of a strategic component. Okay. So when are you able to look at the problem strategically, and do you understand the larger design system, right? So you might have come in at as an interaction guy or a visual guy, but are you able to understand how these different disciplines play in with each other? how do you kind of take data from different places and influence your designs? So those are the things that I'm looking for at the next level. And again, keep in mind, at the end of the first year, I'm also looking at very, very clean execution. Can this person execute cleanly, right? So this is the basic fundamentals. Can you take a screen and execute cleanly and effectively? So again, one of the best examples that I've seen, again, if Saddal is here, I just like was blown away by his work, because Saddal's work at an execution level, right, was exactly what I would expect of somebody who did like a rock star job on the first year, right? And that, in addition, so tool competence, in addition to understanding the different, form elements and understanding how to critique, is exactly what is required at the 1 year target. Okay. And as you go more and more senior, I would be looking at more strategic components. I would be looking at your communication skills. I'd be looking at your variabilization skills. I would be looking at, are you able to look at the process and, understand which process has to be customized, why? And by the way, there is also a special discussion about process that I want to just seed in you, because that's a discussion I want to have at a later point. But yeah, so this is what I'm looking at. So when you're at a junior level, you're managing the screen, then you're managing widgets, then you're managing screens, then you're managing probably experiences, then you're managing products. And so that's how you kind of grow in your organization over time. Does that answer that question?
Yes, Prasad. So it was asked from the form, Google form that we sent out.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
All
So
right.
getting to the next question. What will be the effect of AI in UX industry?
Right. This is a whole different day of presenting and talking. But, AI is, there's two ways to look at it, right? The first one is, how does AI impact your job, right? And the second aspect of it is, how do you use AI to build products, right? So there are two different components in that, okay? So the first component, I think, how does it impact your job? I think, it just takes it to the next level, right? So if you think about it, originally it was, you were looking at, designers were creating websites that were informational in nature. So you go to that website and say, okay, oh, wow. So this is a flat website. There's nothing, no form fields, nothing. You're just reading and you're consuming information. Okay. Then it came to a two-way transaction. So you have a basic database and you are entering some data. It's querying the database and getting the information back to you, right? Then it kind of evolved to the next level, which is basically creating experiences, right? So which is what is happening is the system itself is deciding which database to read from, what to do. And, just like if you look at the Amazon page, right, just the shopping, the view item page, that individual page is probably called like 5 or 6 different databases to create a unified experience for you. Okay. So that is that aspect, right? But today you're actually talking about how do you collaborate with a computer to get a task done. So, in the previous one, you're saying, I'm going to buy, so here's all the information you need about this product. Okay. But the next part is really, how do you decide what you need to do? Can you have a computer prompt you that some work needs to be done? And then also realize in the previous one, you had a lot of information, you had to read it and you had to evaluate it. In the new one, there's probably like, you're just doing the work and the computer is also making decisions for you simultaneously, right? So there's a lot of those kinds of components where when do you give control to the computer? When do you give control to the human? How do you transition between that experience? What do you do when the computer is creating, when the AI is basically giving you solutions that are not trusted, versus how do you handle it when the AI is giving you solutions that are very high in confidence? So for example, you have a medical AI that's saying this guy has X problem and you need to do Y procedure on that person, right? Now, would you trust that AI or not? Right? And so there are those kinds of questions that we as designers have to think about. And how do you mediate? Or even like if you think about it, Tesla automatic driving, right? So there's this whole story that said, the Tesla automatic driving caused a 8-car crash on the highway. Okay. So you're realizing like with an AI where the consequences, maybe your confidence is 70-80%, but the consequences of mistakes are very, very severe. How do you handle that? Right. So these are the kinds of challenges that we as designers have to think through and resolve. Right. Now, the next question, the next component of this question is, well, how is it going to change my job? Right. And I think a lot of it is already changing. If you're, realizing, like, if you think about it, the stuff that I talk about, right? Logins. Okay. How many ways can you log in? It's a finite element, right? So if you want to log in, what do you need to do, right? So a designer would technically have to come in and, at some point tell the system like, yeah, it's a high trust, high security kind of a scenario where the person is on a mobile device and this is what it is. And the AI recommends certain wireframes for you and certain screens for you, right? And there are things that are already available. In fact, somebody just sent me a message today. Let me just look at this and I will tell you what that link is. Okay, it's called uibot.app. So I would love for you to check it, uibot.app, right? Now, this is interesting. So there are a lot of these kinds of solutions that are out there that will tell you like, okay, here I'll develop this experience for you. I'll generate the screens for you. There are things that will do that for you. And I think that's where designers have to kind of step back and take we are taking a more of an executive role. Okay. So the executive role is saying, does this make sense or not? Right. So what has happened, the designer's job, the way I look at it is, it's going to change from being the person who's going to do the designs and do all that stuff to the person who's going to approve the work. Right. So there's a higher order of expertise that will be required on your side to make sure whatever the system is approved is correct or not. Right. So that is that. And then I would say, what skills do you need? Right. So in fact, one of the skills, one of the most fundamental skills that I think, any designer should know is variabilization and how to do journey maps. Right. So how to set up the journey map is an important skill because, as an AI person, how would you design it for an AI? So what you do is you do a journey map and say at each part of the journey, what are the different AI components and how do they help you? And then you can start planning how the AI coordinates with you, right? So that's how you start planning the blending experience. So that's why I would say the first step to kind of learning to work with AI is to kind of think about journey maps. How do you structure it? What is, how do you merge both of those components? Then the second component is it's also understanding how AI works, at least understanding what kind of solutions are out there and kind of being familiar with them so that you can now start saying which technology you can implement and how you can implement it. So that's what my advice would be is, this is a super exciting time and it's not like jobs are going to be lost technically. I would say that the amount of work to be done will increase dramatically, but at the same time, the number of people required to do a job will also reduce. So it's, in the long term, it's just going to create more jobs, but the requirement to do those jobs is going to increase. Does that answer the question, guys? Yes, no? Yep. Cool. So there are more AI solutions out there that are experiments. There's also AI that helps you pick colors. There's AI that helps you pick experiences, layouts. There's a lot of AIs that are coming out. And in fact, if you look at there's a YouTube, on YouTube, there's one where this person literally types in like, I want to create an app that does this, and this. And in about 30 seconds, it basically duplicates Instagram. Right. And this with code, it's like a fully functional piece of code or like front end code that comes out. Right. And this was 3 years ago. So I would say this is only going to move forward a lot more. So there's opportunities are there. It's like just that you have to kind of start embracing it and moving forward.
Cool. So here we have the next question for you. So how would you transform a company from a type 1 company to a type 3 company, and how long should it take?
Okay. I would not transform. Right? I would leave the company and go to a different company, right? Because see, the definition of type 1 company is fundamentally this. It's a company that does not know what UX is and does not care about UX, right? They don't want it. So why would you want to sit there, try to convince people like this is what you want, whereas you could be in some other place and growing very dramatically? So the definition where I would say is, the transformation opportunity happens in type 2 companies. Okay. Type 2 companies that understand what they want UX, but they don't know how to get there. Right. And that is when, and this is the higher end of type 2. The bottom end of type 2 is they're still trying to figure out like, okay, what is UX and stuff like that, right? So, but the higher level of type 2s are exactly that. They understand it and they want to get there, and they are picking you up. Either you got there by luck or by referral, or they worked really hard to make sure the right person is in the right job. And now they're looking to you, they're giving you the freedom to execute, right? And scale up and set up the systems and processes. That is the place where you want to be, because whatever you say will actually accelerate very, very quickly, right? And your career moves very quickly, because if you're at a type 2 company that's at the, they've decided they want to move to a type 3 company, you are getting all the opportunities you want. You can very quickly build your own team. You can get into leadership roles very, very quickly. So because it's an organization that's scaling up and that's hungry for that change, right? So my advice is, never waste your time with type 1 companies. Go into type 2 companies that are ready to change and they're interested in changing, and then kind of build the transformation program in place. And moving from a type 2 company to a type 3 company is probably about an 18-month program, right? You just literally set it up and then you kind of execute, because you understand that all your leadership is aligned with you. Cool. So does that answer your question?
So it was from Simran. He's raising his hand.
Okay, go ahead, Simran.
Hi, can you hear me, Prasad?
Yes.
Yeah, so I probably should add a little more context to what I meant. What I was coming to say is, if you were, let's say, running a type 1 company, how long would, and let's say the organization was like, okay, Prasad, please take care of the company and make it a type 3 company. Considering all the people that are under you, all the other designers, how long would it take you as a design lead or a VP of design to transform that company from type 1 to type 3? And how would you go about doing it?
See, the moment the organizational leadership says that I'm a type 1 company, they're no longer a type 1 company, right? Because they have realized that what they don't have, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that has shown an interest in moving up. So that's the point. So, a type 1 company does not have that level of introspection. Okay. But in a type 2 company, there are a series of things that you need to do, right? If you want to transform that company into a type 3 company as a design leader, right? The first thing you need to do is you need to basically sit down and identify what are the skills that are needed, right? So because I can focus on hiring, but if I don't focus on the business problem, I'm going to be out of a job, right? So what I need to do, the first thing I need to do is I need to figure out who the key core stakeholders are, which will probably take me a few months, understand who the leaders are within that ecosystem, who are my champions. I need to find champion partners within that organization, right? And just because I'm saying an organization is going to become is a type 2 company does not mean everybody believes in UX, right? So there will always be resistance. The people who are used to doing things their own way, so why would they want to change? Okay.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is you want to identify champions who are willing to work with you. Okay. Once you identify those champions, then you basically say, okay, now how am I going to create a plan? You understand what their job requirements are, right? And then you say, okay, I understand this is what you want. I want somebody to do my graphics, but this is what I would love for you to do. I want you to give this guy freedom to do A, B, and C. And if your champion is agreeing, then go hire a person that's able to do that. Now, building a team is actually very, very hard, because imagine like out of every 500 resumes that you get, you only hire one person at the UX level. That's a huge scarcity within India. So you want to find those people that have like at least 3 to 4 years of experience, understand UX, and are now coming in and they're mature. And so now they become your champions within that organization, right? And then you systematically start get your first couple of wins, which is what I call time to value. Okay. You want the organization to see value in transitioning from a type 2 to a type 3 company, where you do a couple of successful projects, you partner with people. And then once that is done, then you basically identify you have to spend a lot of time grooming and training the folks that are there that you've relied on. And then you basically set up your plan, the career progression charts and all that stuff. And then you take it to the next level.
Okay.
Okay. So that is where the overall process, a very optimistic level, takes about 18 months. Again, everything depends on where they are in that continuum of type 2. Are they low type 2 or high type 2?
Mhm. Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. So the next question, Prasad, is coming from someone who has been working in the industry as a UX UI designer in India. And what they are saying is, in the name of UX and UI, they are building graphics and screens, and they are really struggling to understand the deeper topics of and concepts of UX. So how does one deal with that, and how can they get out of it?
See, I think the simplest way, and this is something that I said, like you already have a job. How many years of experience did you say they had, Saurabh?
1 to 2.
1 to 2. I think it's good, right? So you have a job, you have the experience to show for it. Now the question is, that's fine, right? So the way you're looking at your current job is, I have to do what they tell me to do. But the other way of looking at your current job is, this is where I'm going to practice all my techniques and experiment with what I need to do to get to the next job. Okay. So this is where, for example, one of our members, right? So the one simple technique that I tell people about is, and these are practical solutions, right? So one of the simple things that I tell people is, send out minutes of meeting. Okay. So minutes of meeting indicates like, okay, so we had a discussion, and in that meeting, you sit down and ask that person like, okay, why are you asking me to do this, right? Document the reasoning and say, based on this feedback, this is what it was. We discussed that there are other solutions. However, this was the decision that was taken. Send it to everybody. Simple thing, right? Every time you're in a meeting, you send that minutes of meeting to everybody, right? Immediately, the first thing that happens is everybody in the team is now aware that we are documenting, and my decisions are, I'm held accountable to my decision, right? Even if you say this is wrong. Now, one of the other members, what they did, they start sending minutes of meeting, and it was what they started doing after that was, they would say, listen, this is the problem, and this is what I would say, it's a simple thing, right? Again, you might argue that you are asking me to work more than 8 hours, work-life balance and all that, but I say practically that's not how it works, right? So when you're starting off your career, you have to kind of get your traction. So that is what is most important. So if you have 8 hours to do the job, my argument is, okay, spend your time, do what you've been told to do, and then do a couple of variations that you think are correct. Okay. Then when you're going into the meeting, you say, okay, yeah, here's the solution. Now, here are other solutions that may work for you, right? Tell me what you think, and these are the reasons why I think they will work. Okay. Now, whatever they say, document it, minutes of meeting, send it back out. Right. Now, what will happen is eventually you keep doing that over time, they start realizing that you are correct more often than not. Right. And at some point, the organization mindset changes. And this has happened. This has happened for multiple members within our own community. And it's happened multiple times. Okay. Where suddenly the product manager basically comes and says, okay, I think you know what is your suggestion. So instead of saying, okay, I'll tell you what to do, the power shifts very gently to saying, what is your suggestion? Okay. And when you send the minutes of meeting, then everybody come to you and say, okay, what did we decide? What did we decide this or did we decide this? Now, suddenly you become the center of the team, right? And you are the judge for a lot of these decisions. And gradually you start taking on more responsibility, more power, and you have more influence within the team, and you then transform your role into things that are more meaningful. Okay. Now, at some point, you can say, okay, the organization is changing or it's not changing. If it's not changing, but you've done your UX stuff. And again, there's a lot of free content, even within our website. On YouTube, we've got all of that content. And again, shameless plug. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe so that, you get all the updates. But again, you're watching on YouTube, we have a whole Medium article stuff, all that content. So just read up and start practicing at your work, and this thing will change. Minutes of meeting, and then give your alternatives with your reasoning, and gradually the system changes. And after you spend a little bit of time, if the organization doesn't change, you still have a body of work in your portfolio to now apply for a UX job and move into a role that will help you grow into the role that you want. Does that answer, guys?
Yep.
Yeah. So Ishita, for UX leadership, right? So we actually have a book on that. So which is actually published. It's a widely published. So Saurabh, if you can share the link, that'd be awesome. because that is designed only for design leaders and business leaders. It's not designed for designers as such.
Sure, I'll share the link.
Cool.
Okay, so 2 more questions for today, right? So next one is, does the presentation quality matter in a 2 days assignment?
It does. It does. Because do we have a gold standard, Saurabh, that we can share?
For presentation?
Yeah. I mean, okay. Maybe, see, the simple thing that I look for in a presentation, right? So it's how nice is it, right? What is your style of explaining the story, right? Are you, is it text heavy versus visual heavy? So I think it tells me like this is interesting for a lot of designers. They think that their artifacts, my screens, whatever I do is important, but really more important than that is the presentation itself. Because I am looking to see, are you aligned? Are you clean? Is it like explaining something? Does it look nice? Have you thought about the person who's listening to your presentation? Because there'll be people that will have like 50 different slides on there. And they know upfront that it's a 15-minute presentation, right? So in 15 minutes, how can you present 50 slides in that time frame? So there's a lot of planning. So the presentation that you do tells me a lot about your planning, your strategy, what you think is important. Are you even considering the observer or not? Those are the things that are that I'm picking up as I'm watching. And more important, and actually more on a more consistent level, I'm looking at consistencies across your screen, right? Are you doing, is your screen jumping up or down? Is your presentation running? I mean, these are simple things, but it tells me that you have the eye for perfection. You understand when something is going wrong and you're going to fix it, right? And so generally a good designer, no matter what artifact they do, everything looks designed, right? And somebody who's not that, they'll say, when I've been given a task, I will focus, but when it's something else, I will not focus. Then it tells me that they're not trained. It's not it's not an innate part of their working. So then it tells me they're not ready in that, at that level yet. Right? And the most common metric that I tell people is this, right? You should be able to stand 6 feet away and tell if something is a pixel off, right? Just by looking at it. And it's not a logical thing, but you should just feel something is wrong emotionally, like, or something like, that screen doesn't look right. And I mean, that is the standard that I would look for, because if you have that standard and you know it's wrong, then you can easily like kind of fix everything. Everything looks perfect if you're approaching it from that perspective.
So what I understand from your answer is, you should also understand the user who is going to look at your assignment submission, right? And they only have 15 minutes of time in which they have to make decision and judgment about your work and what you are explaining, right? So it's very important to, think about that also from the experience design perspective.
Absolutely. Your storytelling, your understanding of the plan, how you planned, how you practiced, all of those things I can tell from the way you present.
Cool.
I mean, you guys can tell that too. Like, I mean, when you are part of some of our Feedback Friday sessions, you'd actually realize, yeah, this person did really good work, but they didn't practice it. You can tell, right? And if you can tell, the interviewer can obviously say the same thing.
Right. So now it's the time for the final question that we have, which is a kind of pressing argument, which is, okay, we have a lot of UX processes in place, right? But we also say always, whenever you are solving a new problem, the context is different. So you won't be sure that, whether a specific process will work for it or not, right? And on the other hand, the other argument is process is designed so that you can use it multiple times, right? So that you don't have to define another process, right? So how will you balance between these two different arguments when you are working on something?
Right. And see, when I say, the process has to be modified to the problem at hand, right? That is my take, my perspective, right? And the reason I say that is something which is very, very straightforward, right? So let's say you're building a nut, right? What does the process do? The process is, if you follow a series of steps consistently, you will get the same output, no matter how many times you do it. That is what the definition of a process is, right? So if you have a little nut that you want to create, okay, and you say, okay, I'm going to start the process. So essentially there's going to be something that's going to take the metal and mold it into a, into a hexagon. Then there's probably going to be something that drills into it. Then there's going to be something that kind of presses down on it to give it like a fixed size and stuff like that. And then you get the nut, right? Now, let us assume that suddenly, instead of, using aluminum to make that nut, you've been given steel, right? Will the same process give you the same output? Not really, because the material has changed. The tensile strength of the material is different, right? Therefore, you need to go back into the process and understand what you need to change because a variable in your process has changed, right? The same way, let us say, if you say, instead of giving you like 10 molds at a time, you're getting only 5 molds at a time. Your process has to change because all the other machines have to work at the same synchronicity. So you have to slow down everything else. Otherwise, if you say the process is the same, you're going to get a lot of half-finished nuts, right? So the same way that I say is when you're approaching design, okay, you need to understand the context in which you're approaching it, right? And understand that the process works a majority of the time, right? But let us say suddenly, the process says you have to do research and then, you have to do, and that's why, I say that double diamond process or whatever, all that stuff. I don't appreciate that from an experienced person because I am looking to see how well they understood that process and how they're customizing it, right? So when you look at this process and you say, okay, what happens if suddenly your product manager comes to you and says, we have 48 hours to fix this problem and launch it, right? Now, you don't have time to do the whole double diamond. So what are you going to do in that case? So where are you going to compromise? If you're going to compromise somewhere, then how are you going to make sure you're reducing your risk? Because every time you compromise, your risk increases, right? So then what is your strategy for reducing the risk? So you have to do something else to manage the risk, right? So in this case, classic example, you say, okay, I cannot do qualitative studies. For sure, I cannot do, right? So what do? You might actually say, okay, yeah, my risk is high. I have only one day to kind of figure out where the problem is, one day to design the solution, okay? So if I have one day to figure out the problem, I cannot go talk to people. So what am I going to do? I might actually go look at customer complaints, right? That might give me information. But again, reading 10,000 customer complaints will not get me to the answer, right? So maybe I might actually go into click-through logs. Maybe that is going to give me a sense, right? Or maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to 4 people and look at click-through logs so I can explain, I can triangulate much more quickly, right? So these are things that you are doing. So you're saying, okay, I don't have time. So my risk is increased that I might solve the wrong problem. So let me change my strategy for research and I'm modifying my process to get my data, right? Now, let us say in some other case, let's say, your client only wants to see colors, right? Or your boss only wants to see colors. They don't really care about your workflows. They don't care about your wireframes. They don't care about all that stuff. And no matter how much time you do and you agree with them and all that, when you finally come up to the last part, they will give you more feedback and make you go back and solve the problems from the beginning itself, right? What do you do in that case, right? The correct process is you're basically doing interaction, then your visual and all that stuff. But now what do you do in this situation, right? In this situation, what you're doing is you're saying, okay, fine. What I'm going to do is, you're probably going to run a training program, right? So you say, this is what I want. And then you're going to send your minutes of meetings and, you're keeping the process the same. This is where you're kind of saying, no, I'm going to stick to the process, but I'm going to hold you more accountable, right? That's also a strategy. So what I'm trying to say is, you have to understand the realities of the situation on the ground, right? And based on the realities of the situation, you have to then look at your product or your process and say, how do I make this process different to still get the same output? Okay. Now, there's also this beautiful work. There's a complete textbook written, which is a textbook by, it's called, Expert, Novice to Expert. I think it's a paper by Dreyfus. I'm just typing it in. It's a Novice to Expert by Dreyfus and Dreyfus. And these guys actually did a whole study on how people start when they're novices and then how they become when they're experts. Okay. So the point is, when you're novices, you learn with systems and process. This is the way you do it. This is the only way you do it. Okay, so what that does is it reduces your chances of making a mistake 90% of the time. But 10% of the time, you will make a mistake because you are following the process blindly, right? Or 80% of the time, or whatever. There's a percentage, you will do it, right? But as you get more and more experience, what happens is then you start seeing the nuances in that process. Then you start realizing what to break, how to break, and then what is the best way to do it, how to modify it. And so that's how you become an expert. Okay, so this is how you basically look at it. So again, when I look at process, I would say, learn the process because that's how you start off. But as you get more senior, understand why the process is the way it is and what needs to change and what stays the same.
Awesome. That was a really nice explanation, Prasad. That clarifies, how you balance between following a process versus breaking it based on, what kind of practical constraints you are in and, what kind of context are you looking for.
Right. I mean, this is another thing, right? So we always make a rule saying that, always your buttons have to be red in color, okay, or whatever. Your buttons have to be big and they have to be designed in a certain way. But is there a possibility that by breaking that rule, you can still succeed? Absolutely, right? Sometimes designers deliberately break that rule to achieve a business outcome or a user outcome, right? So rules are there, but they're valuable. But blindly following it does not make sense. Understand why that rule is there. Understand, what it helps for and what it is against, and then modify it accordingly.
Awesome. So that ends all the list of questions that we have for today. It's been a really nice session, and I hope you guys have, got a lot of insights.
Rima has asked a question, and I know she's been very patient. Is it okay if I just answer her question? I don't know if she's here.
Let me pull that question up. It's basically,
Is Rima here though? Oh, there she is. Okay.
Yeah. So I have got a task to design a dashboard within 3 days. Now, which type of design should I have to do? Wireframe, rough sketch, high fidelity prototype?
Okay. So, I just ask you, and if you feel comfortable, you can share. If you don't feel comfortable, you can say, I don't feel comfortable, Rima. Okay. So the question is, what are your strengths? Is it interaction, visual, or research?
Right now, I'm doing research and obviously interaction design, work on visual design most of the time.
Okay, you work on visual design and you're doing research. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what is this job for? Who is this job hiring?
There was a company, I cannot remember its name. I'm applying for part-time job. Yeah, you can say internship.
Internship. So
Yes.
what are they looking for? So when you read the job description, what skills are they asking?
Skills like know about Figma tool, know about wireframe. That's very basic things they ask.
No, so when you look at the definition, do they tell you more interaction level stuff, like, understand the system? Or are they telling you more visual stuff? Or are they telling you, what are they kind of hinting towards?
No, actually, there is no such as that type of description. They didn't give him. So I'm a little bit confused.
Okay, no. So, if they're saying, I want the final outcome. So if they're saying you must know Figma, right? What work are you going to do? So if there's some hint there, right? So generally, companies that, at least in India that I've seen, that do not say I'm looking for interaction visual research, they're usually looking for visual guys, right? Because they don't know the difference between everything else, right? Companies that ask for interaction, they know upfront, this is what I want. Or companies that are looking for research, they know upfront, because research and interaction are not that commonly known in, type 2 companies or type 1 companies. Okay. So when that company is asking, they're probably looking to look at your artifacts, your final artifacts. Okay. So the way I would probably approach it is like, you got a task to design a dashboard within 3 days. What type of design should I do? At the bare minimum, you need to have at least one high fidelity screen. Okay. That looks technically good. Okay. Now, what you would need to do is you would probably, and again, they probably are looking for some kind of reasoning and stuff like that. You want to be able to say, this was the problem I noticed, these were the elements, and this is why I prioritized. And this is the problems that my screen is solving, and this is how it's solving it. Okay. If you just do that and do one screen, that's good enough. Okay. With that description, because what happens is most people what they'll do is they'll do 3 or 4 screens and submit it, and they may not be that good. Okay. Versus you just do one screen and do it really, really well. And then you give the attending logic to it, it makes you stand out automatically.
Yeah, actually, after attending the college, I have lots of thought in my mind how to design it, how it perform, how it works. So within 3 days, this is very tough for me to proper way I have to design it and how it works. Lots of things in my mind, so I couldn't understand what to do now. Within 3 days, this is impossible work.
Right. So that's a conundrum, right? The more you know, the more you realize how little you know, right? And it's if you don't know anything, you think you're a rock star anyway. So that's a problem. So I would say, usko problem ko break it down, right? So figure out a small set of problems, right? So what you can say is, okay, so here's a screen. Now understand what that screen is doing first. Okay, this screen is designed for people to make the following 5 decisions. Okay, try to figure out what decisions the screen is helping you do. Okay, or try to understand. Okay, once you do that, then you say, if these are the five key decisions, then is there a way to prioritize? Can you reprioritize the decisions, right? Or even if nothing, like, can you look at that screen and can you do a basic audit, right? What is wrong with the screen? What are the problems on that screen, right? You don't even have to solve it for any specific problem. Just I do an audit, identify the problems and solve those problems. That's it. Okay, because I would say the majority of people don't really know how to do an audit, right? So, agar aapne audit kar bhi diya, that is good enough. Okay, and don't worry about completely redesigning it. If you have the time, you can redesign. If you don't have, that's fine. Just solve the problems and pitch that. Okay. Now, do you have a basic design or do you have no design?
I have basic design.
So they have given you some kind of basic design, is that right?
Yes, there is nothing. I mean, there is nothing actually. In that page, there is no such thing.
But are they telling you this information will come here, this information will come here? Okay, that's it. Just look at what information is coming there and say, what decisions is the person trying to do? Okay, then do an audit and then just redesign it for that and put the colors on it. That's good to go. Okay. And colors if you are, this is also another trick I would say is like, especially if you're applying for an internship, nobody is expecting you to do rocket science, right? So there are a lot of UI kits that are available, right? Just take a UI kit that applies to this problem and execute with that. That's good enough. Okay. Just make sure your alignments and everything is consistent. Cool. Awesome. All right. So we're done.
Yes, we are done. We are done with today's questions. It was an engaging session. And for those of you who are watching us live on YouTube, subscribe so that you can, get notified about the next sessions like this. And yes, that's it for this one.
So now this is my last session for the year in India. I'm heading out. I'm taking my dog to the US. Yeah. So it's going to be fun.
Awesome.
So for the last 3 days, I've been training her to sleep in the crate. And this one does not like to sleep in the crate. So what she does, she's even smarter than me. So what she does is she waits for me to fall asleep and then she'll start barking. Because then I have to let her out because I'll be frustrated. Usko bahar nikalna hai. So now we are like fighting a battle of wills at like 2 a.m. in the morning. But it's going to be fun. I think this is going to be a super exciting trip.
Nice.
So have a happy new year. I think we might meet on the 30th, but otherwise, if we don't have a happy new year, and I'll see you guys soon.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. Good night.